the cherry blossom falls on the character's shoulder and he brushes it off. Now in Japan, cherry blossoms, or sakura, are a symbol of transformation. By the sakura touching this character, it symbolizes the physical transformation he's made into the senator. But for those in the know, it also foreshadows the internal transformation that's going to happen. It's kind of like, how can you describe fast, whoosh, if you don't know slow, put, put, put. What this means is that the world isn't made up of static stereotypes like super macho or super feminine. There's feminine elements in the masculine and masculine elements in the feminine. It's a mixture, it's give and take. And this creates more dynamic and realistic characters and stories when you use the yin and yang. Another back and forth between reality and creativity is Operation Yashima. In March 2011, after the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster, there was a call by TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, for Japan to conserve its power. And this sparked a Twitter campaign dubbed Operation Yashima. Now, this refers to the anime franchise Evangelion, where Operation Yashima is when all of Japan has to pool together its electrical power to power a positron rifle to repel a monstrous invader. What's interesting is that Operation Yashima itself is a reference to the Battle of Yashima, which took place in 1185 in March and involved what else but a fortress. So here we have art imitating life and life imitating art in a cyclical fashion. The island fortress mentality is being infused into Japan's stories, but at the same time you see these fictional stories being used to rally the Japanese people and affect history. Japan is in us all. It's in us subliminally, meaning we don't even recognize it. Mario Brothers and of course Pokemon. You may or may not think about Japan. I mean, G.I. Joe, it doesn't get any more American than that, right? But the truth is, a lot of these were animated in Japan in the 1980s. But as time went on, those same animators that worked on G.I. Joe and other animation from the 80s went on to form studios like Ghibli, which made the Academy Award-winning Spirited Away. You can see certain animation techniques of scaling, framing, color piecing, and speed lines called Fafner, where an island is literally an island fortress. In other words, it's a mechanical island, like an aircraft carrier, and if it's threatened, it can defend itself with an arsenal of built-in weapons, or if it's contaminated, it can actually separate chunks of the island and detonate them. It even has a number of satellite islands that follow it, which can also be set adrift. There is this mentality that you have to protect yourself from the outside world when you're an island nation. And you have complementary opposites, dancing and fighting, that occurred in the same space. Yet, one is associated with celebration and one is associated with conflict, but they both require great skill. So you have these two forces playing off of one another, just like yin and yang, and it's almost like a waltz for survival. And I become aware of Japan's animation, or anime, through the Cartoon Network block called Toonami. These were Japanese shows, English dubbed, but essentially uncut. Two of the shows that really made the distinction clear for me were Gundam Wing and The Big O. The former is about teens fighting a guerrilla war with cutthroat political themes and dealing with military-industrial complex and peace negotiations. The latter was a noir genre tale which talked about the nature of memories and reality itself in the midst of a class warfare. These are supposed to be kids' cartoons, but they're dealing with heavy serial themes about life and death, far more complex than a Scooby-Doo mystery. That's where we get to my Rangaku reversal. You're likely familiar with the term Rangaku, which means Dutch learning. It's a term for learning of Western technology and medicine in Nagasaki during the Tokugawa period. Mountain versus spiral narratives. In East Asia, and by extension Japan, there's a more non-linear model that's used. It can seem a little chaotic at first, but I find it a lot more rewarding. I've heard it referred to as the spiral. On it, you have characters and story arcs starting on different points on the spiral. And as the story progresses, all of these different stories and characters are pulled towards the center of the spiral. So you have all these parts that seem separate and not connected, but you know they connect somehow, and it keeps the reader engaged. You may not meet the main character you meet may not be the first character, it may be the third in this format. And every character is often allowed their own mountain narrative within the spiral. So you never know quite when the end is, because sometimes a character's end is not the end of the entire spiral. It's still spiraling towards the center. The result feels more like a roller coaster ride than just climbing a mountain. You can see that there's valleys and peaks, but like a roller coaster, you're not exactly sure what's coming next. In that sense, it's a little more like real life. Aikido is a defensive martial art where you defeat an attacker or disarm them through using their own energy against them. As such, you have to learn to let go and act with subconscious efficiency and minimal energy. So, if someone grabs you on the wrist, rather than yanking, you just spin your wrist and you break the hold like that. You make sure you're limp and you're using their energy, all of their energy, against them. Mecha literally refers to anything mechanical or machinery related, but is often associated with a genre of giant humanoid robots piloted by men and women. In the West, we tend to call them mechs, and they're basically treated as walking tanks. But in Japan, mecha are more elaborate and treated as more than weapons. In the mecha genre, the narrative demonstrates the relationship between the pilot and the machine, the robot they control, meaning the pilot is almost the heart or soul of the machine, and the machine is just a skin. In this, the machine becomes a reflection of the pilot's will and self-development to overcome both internal and external obstacles. Japan's use of creativity, especially following World War II, to process and explore its own history of war and peace, isolation and integration, East and West, have ultimately inspired my own explorations in writing to bridge the future and inspire critical thinking about our world.